You're listening to The Circle on Wisp Sports Radio, presented by retired Hockeyroo player Ash Nelson.
Some of us wait our whole life to become talented and proficient in sport. Others have the gift or the knack right from the get-go. Serena Williams, Michael Phelps, figure skater Tara Lipinski are all familiar names when it comes to the term child prodigy. Another familiar name in the world of hockey associated with child prodigy is Australian Hockeyroo Casey Sablowski, nee Eastham. Playing in the under-18 competition at the tender age of 13, just how did Casey maintain motivation to play at the top level, and what advice does she have for parents with talented children? To answer all these questions, Casey, welcome to The Circle.
Hi Ash, thanks for having me.
All right, Casey, age 13, you play in state under-18s. Age 14, you play in under-21s. And then when you reach 16, you play your first year in the Open Women's Australian Hockey League. As a kid, did you know that you were talented, or a little bit more so than perhaps the others in your age group?
Yeah, I guess as a kid growing up, I knew I had talent, and fortunately I grew up around a local legend and a player that had played for Australia at the time, Diane Gorman, and she saw a lot of promise in me as a junior, and I remember her having conversations with Mum saying that, you know, if I wanted to and was dedicated enough that for sure I would make it. Was just a matter of kind of applying everything and still staying on that trajectory as well. So I guess I kind of knew I had the talent. It was just a matter of whether or not I wanted it enough, and fortunately I had supportive parents that managed to get me where I needed to go in the early days.
I look at kids today and there's so much pressure to train, play in multiple age group competitions with the mentality if they don't do everything or make every single junior team that they're missing out. Did you feel that pressure to play in everything as a junior, and do you think that more is better, or do we need to back off a little bit?
Yeah, no, I actually didn't. I think if you look at from a school's perspective, I never actually represented through the school system at all. I didn't also represent through my local academy. Like you just mentioned before, my trajectory was pretty quick and pretty rapid, so I tended to skip a lot of the age groups and went through. And back then you didn't have to play in your age group. I'm not sure what it is at the moment, but there wasn't a requirement there. And, you know, thankfully it wasn't, because financially we wouldn't have been in a position to enable me to do it, and I would have probably then had to play my age groups, and then I guess debuting and things would have happened a little bit later on. So, I definitely think that now it's probably changed a little bit. Whilst there's some good things, I think, in terms of playing in your own age group, in terms of developing confidence, I'm a huge believer in, you know, really stretching yourself, and I think that's what helped me earlier on. I played with the boys in the junior boys competition until I was about 15 years old, so I think that helped my development a lot too, but also playing in those age groups years above my age.
I often get asked the questions by parents. My kid has potential. I don't want to push them too hard, but at the same time, I want to encourage and motivate them. Looking back, I don't know if you've had the conversation with your mum, but how did she kind of motivate you, but at the same time not push you too far?
I was fortunate that I had an outstanding mum. What she did for me early on in my years, I'm truly grateful, and, you know, I hope to do the same for my children going forward as well. But she was just there. She was never overly pushy. I participated in quite a few different sports, so not just hockey, and I think having that balance helped as well, and I was able to stay quite refreshed early on. And when I decided to make the full-on commitment to hockey and drop the other sports that I was playing, which probably at the time was touch football and little athletics, she supported me and pretty much did everything that she could financially to ensure that I got where I needed to go. I think from a parent's perspective, you just have to support your children and really get to know what it is that they want to do. Some children are quite happy just playing socially and doing all those kinds of things, but some kids do want to go that extra mile, and I was fortunate enough that I had that my mum was prepared to do whatever it took, whether that was, working at multiple jobs, and, having to sacrifice different things, asking her parents for financial help at different situations too, to get me to the tournaments where I needed to go.
You spent some time in Holland playing in the Hoofde Class League, and there's such a large participation and retention of players in hockey over there. What do they do with their kids to keep them engaged in the game comparatively to us here in Australia?
I think one of the biggest, there's a couple of advantages that they have there. The size of their country kind of enables their national tournament to be quite competitive and enable it to run all year round, for the season, so about half the year. That's a huge advantage, I think, in the strength of their national competition. But there was a big resurgence, I think, after the Dutch women won in 2008, I believe. Their participation rates doubled or tripled or something after that time. So I think the success in the national sporting team also helped at that stage too. But I guess the biggest thing I noticed was just that over there, hockey is a lifestyle. It's, it's kind of, whether people play socially or whether it's a bit more serious than that, it just becomes part of their lifestyle. Their weekends, they're happy to just go out there and travel if they need to play, but they really get in and are very supportive of the teams, but it becomes and forms part of their lifestyle, as opposed to, I guess, here where it becomes, I think at the senior level, sometimes it can feel like it's a bit more of a job. For when I was over there, it never felt like that. It just felt like it was, you were competing in this amazing game of the weekend, and I definitely felt that there was more excitement, and people were a lot more passionate, I guess, about the sport than what we are here in Australia.
There's often this perception that those who are gifted as juniors don't develop a work ethic because they rely either on their superior physical size or their superior skills. Where does this sit with you? Did you feel like you developed a good work ethic as a junior, or was it something that you actually had to develop as you kind of moved through the senior levels and could no longer rely perhaps on those skills or that superior speed?
Yeah, I think I probably had it all along. Definitely it was something that I did develop further as I went, but what helped me at the time was when I come through, I think when I was in the national squad, there was girls that were so many years above me that you had to have a good work ethic and you couldn't rely on skill and talent alone. You had to have more than that, and it was demanded by me from some of the senior girls in the group, and I think that really, really helped as I went along. But I think to make it to the top level, you definitely need that within you anyway, and especially become good and have a career probably I was fortunate to have it as long as I did, but you definitely need to have that because there's times where you're not going to be motivated to get up and go to training, those early morning sessions, or you know that there's a session coming up that you don't particularly like. You have to have that good work ethic to get the most out of each session, and I think that's something that I did pride myself on. At times I definitely wasn't motivated for every session, but I managed to get the most out of each session because when I was there it was, all right, this is we're here, I'm not wasting any time, and I'm going to get the most out of what I can.
You had to move away from home and over to Perth from the East Coast, which for international listeners is about a 4-hour flight. What did you find most difficult moving away from home and into a competitive environment as a youngster?
Yeah, I think with Australia, it's the isolation over there because you said it's 4-hour flight, so quite a distance away. And in Australia, obviously the flying, times the expense of flying is so great that it meant I couldn't see my family a lot of the time. It's not like, I guess, if it was anywhere on the East Coast where I could just pop down and an hour and a half later I'd be home. It was a half-day trip if I wanted to get back, so it didn't make it possible to get home for weekends. The isolation was really tough. And then coupled with that is the missing family. I was always a big family girl and came from a small town of Albion Park in New South Wales, and I think at one time before I left, my whole family were living there in terms of extended family. grandparents, cousins, aunties, uncles. We were all all living in the same town, so you just had to pop around the corner and you were at someone's house. Whereas over there, obviously you went in there not knowing anyone. I moved in with 2 girls that were from the program, and, Fiona Johnson I lived with for several years, and she really, I think I can thank her for a lot of how I've grown up over those probably 5 or 6 years that I lived with her. She really took me under her wing and, just did some incredible stuff. And my family as well, particularly thankful to her, as well as some other dear family friends that I've made along the way, which they know who they are. But, I think it was important for me to establish a family network, and with Fiona and also Gail Smith and her daughters, they really took me under their wing, as well as you and your family in the later years too. But that made it, I think, for me, Perth enjoyable and livable, and made it become a little bit of a home. For several years early on, I didn't feel it was my home, and I think that's where I was really struggling professionally at the time with the game. I was, not enjoying it for several years, and I think a lot of that was due to the fact that I hadn't accepted it as home, and I probably hadn't really worked on the networks outside of hockey to make it feel like that too.
Do you think that we bring young players over too early, and would it be beneficial to leave them at home for that little bit longer to mature or to potentially develop those networks before they get over here? Or are you a firm believer that we need to have a centralised program for everybody?
No, I'm not a believer in having the centralised program. I think there's definitely advantages of that, but when you look around the world, I don't think there's been several programs that have performed well without having a centralised program. For me, if I was to do it all over again, I would have loved to have stayed back home and been around family and established myself in a career outside of hockey too, because I think that balance helps on the playing field. But, there definitely needs to be measures taken within each of the states to enable players to do that, because obviously at the time when I came over, it really wasn't an option to do it, because a lot of the girls above me had gone over to become part of the centralised program, so a lot of the strength was then taken out. I think in New South Wales they seem to be doing it pretty well at the moment. They've got some regional coaching coordinators set up throughout the state. Like I said before, with Holland, their advantage having the smaller nation, even New South Wales alone is quite a big state. So we needed those regional support networks, and we didn't have them well established back when I was coming through. So I think they need to be well established, and you need good coaches, good support staff in regional areas, which is where a lot of your talent comes from as well. In order to not have that centralised program. So I think we're getting there, but it will still probably be a little while yet before, our regional centres throughout Australia are really strong, and there isn't probably the need to have to come over to Perth to do it.
And there's always that debate that goes on about whether or not you should give the younger players the opportunity to represent Australia maybe a little bit before they're ready, or are you a believer that they train for a longer period of time and until they really, really earn that opportunity, you give them that debut as a coach?
I think if I'm coaching, if they're good enough, they're playing. I think if you have a good support staff around you that can kind of nurse them through and, don't overwhelm them or bombard them too soon, but give them an opportunity to actually play and experience it if they're good enough. Because for me, I want to be playing alongside, and if I'm coaching, I want to have people that are good enough to compete at that level. So I don't think age should be a barrier. For sure, but I definitely think we need to watch how we groom the younger ones coming through to ensure that they do have that longevity, not to push them too hard too soon, and just keep them really well balanced early on.
You debuted for Australia at the end of 2006 and wore a very famous number, which you did make your own in the end. Do you remember how you felt when you heard or realised you're actually wearing the same number as hockey great and now head coach of Holland, Alison Annan?
Yeah, we were discussing this the other day. So, I'd loved number 4 for longer than I could kind of remember. And when I got the phone call about the options to choose my own number, and, they said, this number's available, what would you like? 4 was available, so I took that without even thinking. And then it wasn't until maybe a year or so after, and I think it was actually Tennille Attard that said at the time that no one had been game to take Alison's number, and I hadn't even really thought about it. And then afterwards I just thought, oh my gosh, I've made this huge mistake. I've picked, the most prestigious number in the Australian uniform. And, I think, as daunting as it was early on, feeling like you had that responsibility, but and you had, some big shoes to fill, I was really excited about the prospect, and I felt like, myself, if out of anyone was deserving of that number, obviously had the greatest respect for Al and the girls at that time, that she personally did really well. The team did great in those years that she was around too. But, I felt like I did deserve it at the time too. So, early on daunting, but then I kind of took it on as a bit of a challenge and wanted to obviously do her proud.
Did you have many conversations with Alison and during that period of time where you took over a number, or when you went over and actually played in Holland?
No, not when I took her number. It wasn't until, when I went to Holland, she'd made contact a couple times, and I actually got invited over to her house for Christmas. I think it was a Christmas night or night before Christmas or something like that, but we happened to be travelling through Europe at the time, so we couldn't make it. But, really nice to feel like you've got those Aussies abroad and supporting you if you need it as well.
And do you think that she's sort of inspiring in terms of women going into a coaching position? When you were a player, you were very analytical, and it sort of seemed like something that you might have been primed to actually do. Has that come across your mind?
I think in terms of women in that role, I think she's doing a great job, and I've always been a firm believer in, regardless of sex, I think it should be the best person for the job. And I think Al, from talks that I've had with some of the Dutch girls too, she's got a great amount of respect with that group, and she is doing some wonderful things there. But in terms of myself, it was something that I had thought of, whether I don't think I'm ready yet to do anything a little bit more serious. But, as you said, I was very analytical. I've always kind of been quite like that, being able to break my game down, break the team's game down. But I think probably long term I see myself in more of a consulting role rather than taking over a whole program as such. But you never know what happens down the line. Something might pop up. But, I think being a consultant coach where you can offer expert advice, but purely be from an external point of view too, not knowing, I guess, what's going on inside the program, and just having a different perspective on things. That's probably where I see myself fitting in the near future.
All right, well, we'll trial your coaching technique at this moment in time. During your career, you played 3 Olympic Games, Beijing, London and Rio. During those campaigns, probably not the ideal result, 2 5th places and then a 6 at Rio. What were your thoughts in terms of the performance at the end of each of these Olympics, personally, but then also as a team?
Yeah, it was very mixed for me. 2008, I obviously went in as the youngest member of that squad. I was 19 at the time. Everything was new, so I was really excited about the prospect of playing at my first Olympic Games. The team, I think at the time, were possibly positioned world number 4. So we were an outside medal chance, but the team was so used to success in the years prior to that I did feel that there was an expectation that we would make the semi-final and medal there. And unfortunately, we drew the last round game, which we needed to win against China, which knocked us out. And that was pretty hard, I think pretty hard to take at the time. I remember being really emotional, and more so for it kind of happens at every Olympics, but you feel for those that don't have another opportunity to do it. So you feel like you've let them down, and it's not by lack of effort or anything, a bit of luck at the time, but you do feel for the other girls because it's their last Olympic Games campaign, whereas at the time I had multiple opportunities after that. So it was really hard to take that one. But, as a young one, I was pretty optimistic about the next couple coming up. London was interesting too, in that I kind of think we probably performed or positioned to where we were at the time. I don't think we were within a lot of luck, probably we were in the playoff matches, and we nearly got there as well. But I thought that we probably, in terms of finishing fifth, that was probably where we were actually at in the world. So I walked away from that campaign from a team perspective, being, quite happy that we probably did so well. From a personal perspective, though, I guess opposite to 2008, I had a really good Olympic campaign, and 2012 I didn't play badly, but I probably didn't play as well as I would have liked. And there was a comment made to myself and Madonna that if the team was going to go well, that we needed to be playing well. And initially after our loss to New Zealand, automatically you felt like that you hadn't done your job, and just left a really bitter taste, I think, after that games personally. But as I said, as a team, it was okay. And then we got to 2000, and this is a really long-winded way of getting through them all. But 2016 Rio Games, I had quite a lot of positional changes leading into that, and quite a lot of injuries. So it was a bit of a tough preparation for me. I think I came back from I had knee surgery the year prior. Then I broke ribs. I had still ongoing hammy things the year before, and then fractured my eye socket only a couple months before. So I had a really disrupted preparation, and I think I changed from defensive midfielder to striker to defensive midfielder maybe again, and then back to defender only a month or two out of the games. It was quite challenging, but I honestly think that probably helped me going forward, because I've always been someone that I feel I get quite stagnant if I'm doing the same thing for quite a while. So I found the challenge of learning a new position quite refreshing. And the same, I guess, with being injured, it gave me opportunities to work on my fitness and do other things that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do had I have been uninjured and, not being able to be in the gym and I wasn't on the track at that stage. I was just doing a lot of bike sessions and other fitness deloading work for my knees. But I think 2016 I was really happy with how I performed as a defender. But I guess the downfall of that was, as a team, I feel like we underperformed to a degree, because there was the expectation, and I genuinely believed that we would medal at those games. We had the team. I thought out of any of the two prior, this was the year that we could do it. I think unfortunately a bit of bad luck again. In terms of professionalism going forward, I don't think there was anything else from a program perspective that we could have done more. We could have done things differently, I think, but could have done more to get a different result.
Well, that's probably the next question. What would you have changed about the preparation and lead up to the Rio Olympics? There was a bit of fallout in terms of the coaching staff after, but in lead up to it, there probably could have been a few things done differently. As a coach, what would you look at changing?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight's always a great thing as well, but look, I think 4 years after, so when we finished the 2012 Olympics, we obviously finished at fifth, and it was the same coach at the time, and his vision was that we needed to really chase down some of those other nations and close the gap. So we went full-time from 2012, basically all the way through until 2016 Olympics. And, I think the lead up to the World Cup in 2014, where we came second at the World Cup, I thought that was ideal preparation. We'd worked really hard, we'd narrowed those gaps, and we'd played in some of the big games in terms of your finals and your semi-finals, although, we hadn't won some of them, but we'd been there. And I think that was really positive. And I just feel that we probably needed maybe a little bit of after the World Cup, needed a little bit more of a lengthy unwind before we ramped it back up again, because I think it was a little bit too full on, I think, after the kind of through that 4-year program. And it was by the time 2016 came around, and even the year prior, it was injury maintenance and management to get people through to the Olympic Games, rather than, I feel, at your absolute peak. And, physically we were well prepared, but I think there was a lot of injuries that were being carried into those games. And with a tournament, 2-week tournament as well, it's really hard to make sure that everyone gets through in peak physical condition by the end of that.
Since the Rio Olympics, a lot's changed for you. You're now a mum, having a little boy last year called Harvey. What's more tiring, life as an athlete or life as a mum?
Oh, it's so funny because I've lived with Mariah Williams for probably the best part of 2 years now, and she constantly will come back after training and whinge about how hard it is, and then or how tired she is, and then I just have to give her one look and she kind of apologises because being a mum is definitely the hardest thing I've ever done so far, and the most tiring. Like I've spoken to you early on, the days where you just get used to sleep deprivation eventually, but it's awful. And obviously the mums out there will know how hard a job it is. Jodie probably, on the other hand, was very fortunate in that Harry had quite a good sleeping routine formed early on, whereas Harvey, on the other hand, he's still challenging at the best of times with his sleep. So, definitely being a mum is a lot more tiring than anything I've had to do on the hockey pitch, that's for sure.
Prior to having Harvey, you're going to come back to international hockey. Where does that sit with you now?
Yeah, I think I'm getting nearer to retirement, to be honest. It's really, I always thought, and I was told early on when I was coming through to, don't retire too soon until you're really done, and when you'll know when it's time to finish up. And I never really had that moment of realisation, and I think it was hard to have that in the way that we finished in 2016. So there was still felt like there was business to be done, unfinished business. And personally, I guess personally how I went at the Olympic Games, I could have been content and walked away from that. But I guess where the group was at the time, I still feel like I had more to offer and to help that next generation kind of come through, because we did lose quite a few after Rio. It's still a hard one for me to really knuckle down. I think in the near future I can't see myself coming back to the group, but I am playing club hockey this year, so just take it one step at a time and see how we go. Club hockey and then potentially AHL after that. Body-wise is another thing. I'm not sure how my knees will hold up, so I'm giving them a red-hot crack. I've got a triathlon in 3 weeks' time that I've signed up for with little or next to no training, but always dive in the deep end first. So dive head first in the deep end. So we'll see how that one goes, and then how motivated I am to do the training. But I think from my perspective, I really miss the girls, and I miss the the games. The training, on the other hand, it's still, for me, I don't feel ready to get back to that level of training, and I think that will be the determining factor for retirement, is that, as much as I'd love to be out there and I feel like I could still contribute, I'm probably at a stage where I don't feel like I can put that much into training these days, and it's all or nothing for me. And obviously with the little one too now, priorities have shifted. So I think, as I said, I'm getting nearer to retirement. It's just really making that decision final, and seeing how we go. But I would expect within the next month or so there will be a decision made, so we'll be looking out for that.
We'll wait with bated breath. You mentioned Jodie Kenny before, your old teammate. She also had a baby and made her return game against Spain just the other week. Why haven't we seen more mums come back and play? I think Hope Munro was the only other Australian player, aside from Jodie Kenny just recently, to come back into the Australian team. Well, it's really hard, and obviously we learnt, and we had numerous chats with the Australian coaching staff and the management at the time, and even getting those communication networks established was quite challenging to begin with. We knew that the window, in our heads, it was to try and get back for Commonwealth Games, and we knew the window was going to be very tight.
But it was, I guess it depends how people's bodies pull up after the pregnancy too. I think Jodie had a natural birth and I ended up with a cesarean too. So there was a little bit of time difference between, or different things required from the both of us if we were to start training. So it was physically really hard, but also just, managing your time and being able to do it. Jodie, I have such admiration for everything that she's done, and now obviously being picked back into that team because I know what she has had to sacrifice. And, good on her, hands up. She's managed to do it, and she's got a super supportive network back in Brisbane with her extended family who have enabled her to keep training and continuing to do that. But, yeah, it becomes a lot more difficult. It's just a constant juggling match, in terms of both of us were still breastfeeding too at the time, so making sure that there was, breast milk in the fridge or freezer for her to go off to training and do all those kinds of things. That became challenging. But, yeah, I think it's just probably the support isn't there at the moment. It'll get there because I think it'll become a lot bigger in female sport. There seems to be throughout international hockey as well. There's a couple of New Zealanders that have done it, Argentinians that have done it as well. So it will pick up, but there was no real direct pathway as to, this is when you have the baby, this is your next period for if you want to come back into the team, this is what it looks like. Are you in or are you out? It took a while for us to establish what that was going to look like. And for me, that's what I needed, an overall picture as to this is what's involved. Are you in or are you out? So it took quite a few months for us to get a bit of an idea as to what it was going to look like. And I think in my mind, I was always unsure. Jodie's mind, she was pretty adamant that she was going to come back. But I think the more that do it, and, Hockey Australia probably now have learnt there needs to be some policies and procedures in place to support women returning to it. And it's not, about making special consideration as such. It's just, giving these people an opportunity as well. And I guess you'd treat it no differently to a long-term injured athlete. It shouldn't be too dissimilar to how they would come back into the program. Mm-hmm. You've got that guarantee, beforehand. But for us, it was always going to be, we'll see how we go. And then once we showed that initial, I'm interested, there needed to be something, I think, firm in place for that. And, yes, sports, I think, now are cottoning on to that and realising that probably experience at the top level is valuable. So hanging on to players and seeing them come back to the sport, whether they just have a break or whether they have children in return, that it is valuable to try and retain some of these players.
All right, Casey, before you go, we've got some quick questions for you. They're very serious. All right. Favourite lolly if you had a choice?
A favourite what, sorry?
Lolly.
Oh, lolly. In the Starburst packets, how they've got the strawberries and cream looking ones?
Right.
Those ones.
Okay.
Yeah. I do like strawberries and cream too, but particularly those ones.
You're very choosy about your lollies. I get the sense. Hardest player to train against?
Oh, to train against. To be honest, it would have been Fee Johnson, who I spoke about earlier. I remember when I came through training against her, it was so tough because she was so physical and she had limbs everywhere that managed to cover so much space. So it was definitely always a challenge coming up against her.
If you could play for another team for a match, what team would it be internationally?
Play for another team?
Yes.
Probably Argentina. Just because I like the creative free license they seem to play with. So I think it would be actually quite fun to be a part of their group.
Just in preparation for you being a coach, what's going to be your favourite saying as a coach?
I don't know, just go out there and have a go. Something very similar, but nothing too serious, I don't think. But, yeah.
All right. If Harvey wasn't going to be called Harvey, what was the backup plan?
Oh, goodness. He was nearly Hudson. He was Hudson for 30 seconds. For a conversation with my mum, he was Hudson for 30 seconds. So that was the backup. But we probably would have sat on it for a little bit longer and, yeah, I don't know. There was a handful of names that I liked that Scott didn't like, and vice versa. So he probably would have been named best for quite a while.
Let's be honest, you don't want to give away all your good names on the podcast anyway. Casey,
yeah.
I wish you all the best with your new life as a mum, and also hopefully you come back should that be the plan or the path that you wish to choose. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me on The Circle.
Thanks for having me, Ash.
For more conversations from the world of women's sport, visit us at withsports.com, where you'll find blogs, videos, articles, and more than 700 episodes of the podcast, which is also available free on iTunes. We cover all sports for women around the world, and join us on social media too at withsports and Nelson_Ashley.